VanDam. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm going to be making this jewelry box. I've never made anything like this before in my life. I'm going to be doing it with basic, super basic hand tools. So let me show you how I did it. First, what we're going to do is we're going to resaw this 3/4 inch piece of walnut so we can get a book match on the door. This whole process was about as fun as you might imagine. I did it partly because I wanted to prove the concept that I could do this with very minimal tools, and partly because I'm a tightwad. Obviously, using a handsaw is not going to get perfect results. I don't own a thickness planer yet because you guys don't watch my videos enough. So I had to hand plane this with this cheap garbage Harbor Freight plane, which at some point actually broke in the process of sharpening it, so I had to actually restore an old Stanley one that my grandpa gave me it's like a 1967. There's also a video on that, so watch that one if you get a chance. But ultimately, I blasted through this. I got everything reasonably smooth, and I did it all with just minor hand tools, so it felt good, and I was really tired and it took way longer than it should have. But what are you gonna? I wanted to make the back of the jewelry box out of cedar so you could get that smell and that sort of anti-bug preservation thing like a cedar chest. So I took these strips that are for roofing and I glued them all together, and again busted out the hand plane. You'll notice it's the Stanley hand plane, not the Harbor Freight version, because like I said, it broke. So I went and planed this all down reasonably smooth. Now we're going to cut up this 1/4 inch plywood, birch plywood, into the different panels that are going to make the drawers and the whole box. At this point I broke out my trusty $10 saw that I bought for $20. Cut all the pieces out. They weren't exactly the same thickness, so I went and set them down, clamped them together, and planed them down so they were the right thickness. Then I put a rabbet around a lot of the edges so it would help glue it all together and keep everything straight and secure and a little bit stronger than it would have otherwise. I cut it down to just below this cross grain, and that made it kind of easy to peel off and set to the exact same depth consistent across all the different panels. I glued up these 4 sides that becomes the back of the box, which wasn't too bad, but when I went to glue up the doors, that was kind of a big hassle. I should have maybe made a jig so everything kind of held in place and kind of straight. You'll see every time I clamp it, it kind of kinks it in the middle. But anyways, I got it done ultimately and turned out not too bad. I pulled out my $10 handsaw that I bought for $20 again and ripped down this cedar panel, which becomes the back of the box. I also marked out and cut some little grooves that ended up being slightly skinnier than my smallest stinking bit. So, not bit, but my chisel, so I had to do it kind of the hard way, but I got that all done. I wanted that so the plywood can kind of sit in this groove and sort of lock into place and not move around, hopefully, and it seemed to work out just fine. Now time for some glue. This one actually went pretty good because I had all these little rabbets that I could just kind of push this into place, and I pre-fit it, so it all worked out just fine. There's a bunch of clamps. I never understood why woodworkers use so many dang clamps until I actually started using them, and then I use every single one I have for every single glue up, no matter how small. Now we'll cut the joinery for these little drawers. I sloppily cut some finger joints first, and then I kind of gave up and only did like 2 fingers on the back of it because it kind of sucked. Anyways, moving on, I got some brass pieces that I'm going to use to hang the earrings on for the back of the whole piece. Drilled some holes and ran that from side to side so you can hang as many earrings as you want. Wrap that with leather. We'll go over that later. Don't worry, people, we're getting close. Stick with me here. Stick with me. So this plywood box I wrapped in this walnut box that I created. 3 sides of it anyways. And I didn't film that because I'm really not very good at cutting this joinery and stuff, and I wanted you to not do what I did. So anyways, it didn't turn out too bad. Glued that to the whole thing, and then I started cutting some of the remaining pieces. This is going to end up being where you hook the necklaces on, which goes in the door. There's several different pieces like that. Going to cut some dovetail joints as well as some basically finger joints to act as the wood hinges. You probably guess what the biggest problem with this is before it even comes out, but The grain direction was a real problem because this is going to end up being the hinge, and honestly it just kept on breaking. The reason I did it is because I wanted this continual grain pattern around the outside of the box. So I decided to compromise and kind of gamble on these hinges. And I don't know, it worked in the end, but I did have to fix this. It kept on breaking. I had to use CA glue several times to glue it back together, but it did work. Gonna have to leave you with the cliffhanger. This is the finishing shots, but I'm going to do the legs, I'm going to do the handles, I'm going to do some of these finishing features on next week's video. We're going to polyurethane it, make it all pretty. But hope you enjoy the hard part of the whole thing. This really did take a lot of time, and I'm glad I did it. And stay tuned for next week because I will finish the whole thing and show you how it turned out. Thanks.